All right, folks, it's time for the Malzberg panel. Don't get too excited. I know you love it, but we have it for you, so everything's working out well. We have John Gizzi, Newsmax Washington, D.C. correspondent, and we have Rick Ungar, the co-host of Steele and Ungar on SiriusXM Radio. Hello, gentlemen.
Hey, what do you mean don't get too excited? You got two great panelists. They should be very excited.
Yeah, I know, but you say Malzberg panel and people start salivating.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah, right, Rick?
This is Rick.
Oh, I'm sorry. I can't tell. Where's John?
I'm agreeing with him.
Oh, there you go. Okay, John. All right. Well, I should know. One of you should have the hat on, and it should be John, but I don't think he has the hat, at least not in the picture. Anyway, big Supreme Court decision today, folks, and that, of course, affects contributions to candidates. The Supreme Court weighing in 5-4 on the side of free speech and saying that the limitations on individuals with regard to contributions to candidates and PACs and also political parties violates free speech. And how big a surprise is this, John?
It's not a surprise, and I've spent my entire afternoon garnering answers from both sides of the political spectrum on this. It's interesting. To no one's surprise, MoveOn.org, Civic Action, and the campaign finance watchdog all weighed in against it, saying it empowers rich people. On the other hand, I spoke to Grover Norquist of Americans for Tax Reform, who said it's not the Berlin Wall falling down, but close. It's a greater blow for greater participation by individuals as opposed to a monopoly for labor leaders who want to be the dominant powers in campaign finance.
Right, Rick, they never whine and cry about labor union contributions, only about so-called rich individuals.
Well, it's true. Look, I mean, I pretty much agree with everything that Gizzi said. The reality is the big winners today, and it is no shock that the Supreme Court went this way, the big winners are the national political parties, because they're the ones who have lost influence to the PACs because of the structure of campaign finance. Now, with that accumulated contribution max going out the window, people are going to be able to give a lot more money to national political parties, and those parties are going to step back up and have a role. And by the way, when you point out that, Grover's comment was what you would expect Grover to say, and in some respects it's true. Unions do have a lot of impact, a lot of money on the Democratic side of the equation. On the other side, you do have a lot of big money that goes into supporting Republican candidates. At the end of the day, my argument would be that it's the average, everyday American citizen who tends to lose out. But this is the future, and Grover was right when he said it's almost the collapse of the Berlin Wall, because what's coming next is the removal of limits on how much you can give to one candidate. The court hasn't done that yet.
Right,
and courts have progressively, since the Citizens United case in 2010, been chipping against the regulation of campaign finance.
They have.
It's been in effect since the mid-'70s. And let me add one point on that. I'm old enough to remember what campaigns were like before the 1974 regulations came into effect, where it was mostly at the state level. There were no limits. Reporting requirement had punishments for violation, but they didn't send you to jail. And I would just point out, kindly check, Rick, the number of incumbents who would lose in those days, as opposed to the record of re-election, which is akin to the late Saddam Hussein's Ba'athist party in Iraq. You genuinely had swing elections, major upsets, and incumbency was not the nearest thing to eternal life.
Well, John, I'm much too young to remember that, unlike yourself. But I will give you this. There is a strong argument to be made based not only on that pre-'74 era that you're referencing, but even in recent history that would tend to say that money does not always end up being the deciding factor, so it's fair for you to point that out. At the same time, I just think that we would all be better off if we took that power away from both the Sheldon Adelsons and from the unions, and we put more of that back in the hands of the average, everyday American. Not to say that it's controlling. Your point is fair, John. But I just think that's a much more democratic approach to elections.
I would just say this, that it is a much more democratic approach, except for the fact it always would violate the First Amendment, which is freedom of expression. And in that particular case, I'd point out that 27 of 50 states now have no limits on donations in state races. I'm traveling to Pennsylvania, which is a case in point. Missouri changed its laws and fought it all the way up to the state Supreme Court. Judge Stephen Limbaugh, by the way, Rush's cousin, made the ruling upholding the right of unlimited donations. And guess what? Incumbents lose, and more middle-class people get elected to office in Missouri.
Well, okay. Look, I actually, even, this may surprise Gizzi, I completely understand the free speech argument behind this. I do. I am not somebody who sits there and goes, boy, the court's sure being corrupt on this. I get the argument. At the same time, to completely buy into the argument, you have to buy that having the ability to spend more money is a real expression of free speech. I understand if you argue for it. But the problem that I've always had with it is if I'm somebody who has less money and you're somebody who has more money, then what you're really saying is you who have more money has more free speech than I do. And I don't think that was the point of the First Amendment.
Well, a publisher of a newspaper
raise more money.
Well, wait, but guys, you could take that argument and say someone who's rich enough to own a newspaper and through his editorial platform has a much more free speech than the average guy on the street. I mean, where do you draw the line? And, when the left, like MoveOn.org, lamenting the Koch brothers and attacking them with like Harry Reid does, there's a guy named George Soros who has just one organization, and in 2011 alone, when Jonathan Soros was the vice chairman of this Open Society Foundation, they alone gave $58 million to liberal, blatantly and openly liberal causes.
You're just pointing out that there's somebody on the liberal side, and you're right, that does what the wealthy Republicans can do. Your better argument, in my opinion, is when you say that when somebody has the money to buy a newspaper, don't they have more free speech? Right. And that's hard to argue. You got a great point there.
Yeah, I should have been a lawyer, just like my mother told me. You see, I blew it.
I don't know. I conceded the point, and I am a lawyer.
All right, now, let me ask you guys about the attack on the Koch brothers. I mean, John, Harry Reid is now making it a habit every single day. He did it today. He did it yesterday, and he does it from the floor of the Senate. A U.S. senator, a majority leader of the U.S. Senate, calling American citizens un-American for simply supporting their political views.
Well, I would just say to Majority Leader Reid, if he's going to call the Koch brothers un-American, as you tell me, say that a fellow, and I hope I'm saying the name right, Tom Strayer.
Yes.
Is also un-American. He is a very wealthy figure on the left, kind of a junior George Soros,
yes,
who recently vowed to put in more money to defend Democratic senators under fire for re-election.
And he has a brother, by the way.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. He has a brother.
I would just say...
Can we characterize this differently? Listen, I completely disagree with the things Harry Reid is saying. I'm not a big fan of the Koch brothers, but the fact that I may not like their politics makes them no less American than I am. Exactly. But rather than approach it by saying, well, if you're going to say that they're un-American, then you better say this guy on the left is un-American. Why don't we just agree that people can disagree on their political positions and all still be American?
Got you. Good way to end it, and appreciate it. And Rick will see you in a little while, and John will see you in an hour as well as the panel reconvenes. Rick Ungar and John Gizzi on the Steve Malzberg Show. Now, when we come back, remember the news anchor who resigned? She quit Russian TV on the air back in March. Well, she will be here to tell us why she did it and what she's doing now and more on the Steve Malzberg Show on Newsmax Television.
We don't just talk about the news, we talk to those making news. This is the Steve Malzberg Show.